The lights are much brighter there.
You can forget all your troubles and forget all your cares.
And go downtown for an hour of the best of British wildlife.
Stay tuned for Autumnwatch Live.
Hello and welcome to Autumnwatch Live, coming to you from the wonderful Wildfowl and Wetland Trust Centre here at Slimbridge in Gloucestershire. A fabulous place for us to base ourselves. The aim of the programme, well, it's to bring you the very best of British wildlife and the full flavour of our autumn as well, and I think we can promise plenty of both this evening, Michaela.
Well, this week we've gone downtown to take a closer look at the urban environment and uncover some fabulous wildlife that may just be right under your nose.
And remember our foxes, our family of foxes at Pitsea Landfill? Well, we'll be catching up with them. Things are really kicking off down there. Where is this all going to end?
Now, if you've been watching the series so far, you'll know that we've been following the fortunes of some young ospreys that we met during Springwatch this year. They were fitted with some extraordinary satellite tracking devices, which means that we've been able to follow them throughout the course of their migration. And we've also been lucky enough to be teamed up with the one and only Roy Dennis, a foremost expert on these birds, and he'll be bringing the conclusion of this story this evening.
And ladies and gentlemen, he's back. The legend that is Bill Oddie will be joining us live. He's looking very relaxed there, just brushing up on his birds or something like that.
Wow, he's reading the Observer's Book of Birds. He should have genned up on that years ago.
Wait a minute, it's not birds.
Book of Pond.
It's pond life. That's a hint. But Bill will be bringing us up to speed with some of his favourite urban wildlife and no doubt much more besides as well. And of course, we'll be catching up with all the comings and goings, the latest news from here at Slimbridge.
But today we're going to prove that you don't have to live in the countryside to enjoy wildlife. Urban wildlife is all around us. You just have to take the time to look for it.
Did you know that in the UK, more than 80% of us live in urban areas, and that by 2030, it's predicted that it might be more than 90% of us? Well, does that mean that the chances of finding any wildlife on a daily basis are dwindling? Well, actually, no, because if you take a good look in any urban area like this, you'll be surprised at what you might find.
This week, Autumnwatch has come to Sheffield, once an industrial heartland, famous, of course, for producing an enormous amount of steel. But now it's been regenerated, and it's turning into a great place not just for people, but for wildlife too. So, what's here?
Well, that's what we've come to find out. We're exploring the city from its parks to its waterways in search of all creatures great and small.
The urban environment really can be a great place to look for wildlife, and in fact many of our cities and towns have a surprising variety of habitats. Some of the wildlife adapts to those habitats, but others actually seek out the warmth and protection of the urban environment. And the great thing about urban wildlife is sometimes it's in places that you just wouldn't dream of looking at. For instance, an insignificant little bush can provide an autumn spectacle, as Chris and I found out.
The heart of Sheffield city centre, with the university,
The library,
the art gallery,
the hotel.
a busy pedestrian crossing on a dual carriageway.
You don't get more urban than this.
You don't. But over here, we've got just a very small collection of bushes, isolated behind here, and within half an hour this is going to transform into a beautiful spectacle which you can see in city centres all over the UK. The spectacle is a nighttime roost. We just have to wait for the city to get dark. And here they come, pied wagtails gathering in the evening light.
Chris, there are loads on that roof now. Look at them all.
I know, look at that. There's got to be, I'd say there's 100 up there now.
Easy,
at least.
and look, they're flying onto this roof.
Presumably they're going to go up here. But it wasn't just us that had noticed the wagtails. A predator.
Listen to the noise.
There's a degree of swirling, and there
look.
is a peregrine falcon flying over in the sky.
Word,
Look at that! Oh, an opportunist predator sweeping in, and they all went up. Now they're coming back again. Look, they're swirling back again. Look at that. Here they come.
So, Chris, why do you think they've chosen this bush?
I think these bushes are ideal for several reasons. Firstly, they're protected from any disturbance, human disturbance. They've got this barrier, then there's a moat, and then a wall to climb over. So it can be a rare event that anyone ever goes in there. Secondly, they're laurel bushes, which means they're evergreen, and they're quite dense. And this is going to protect them from the wind and, to a great extent, the rain too. And then thirdly, they've chosen this site right in the middle of Sheffield because it's warmer here. You know, the heart of our cities can be 5-6 degrees warmer than the outside countryside. And that, if you're a small bird, is the difference between life and death sometimes. Because the city is warmer, and because there are lots of things here that hold heat or generate heat themselves through, poor insulation, it means that there are insects active in cities when they may not be active outside. So they will spend quite a bit of time foraging on buildings.
What is incredible, though, is this noise is going to die right down. And you can walk past here and you wouldn't have a clue that there are possibly 600 wagtails in that bush.
At least. It would be nice if more people engage with them because, frankly, if someone decided that these bushes were, not wanted for some reason and they came in and cut them down, the impact on these animals would be profound. They'd have to find somewhere else. If they did it in the winter, it could be potentially disastrous. So it helps to identify these urban wildlife sites because this one little patch of laurel is incredibly important for the wagtails here. I think I might be going soft. I do. I think I might be going just a little bit soft, because in my increasing age, I've developed a soft spot for those pied wagtails. I normally go for more predatory birds, dashing killers, But those lovely little wagtails, what a treat that was.
They are pretty. I think it's because you've got a cold, you've gone a bit soft.
I think it's just because I've got a cold. I've got a bit of a sniff on, and frankly, it's softened me up.
But they are gorgeous birds. And in fact, we filmed those on an infrared camera because it was nighttime. But our cameramen also had a thermal imaging camera, which is a heat camera. Now, if we take a look at the results of that, it's really interesting. The white areas are the very hot, then it's the red, then the orange and yellow. You see the road, see the amount of heat emitting from that road. You can see that basically there's a lot of heat in the city.
Indeed, and look, here's a view looking down on the wagtail roost itself. So all of those, obviously the things that are flying are wagtails, but all of the other white spots there, here for instance, are the wagtails. And you can see they've spaced themselves out through the bushes. They're not in a great big cluster. But the other thing that we spotted is this. Alongside this collection of bushes, there were some air conditioning ducts there. And these were pumping out heat. So not only were they finding a nice warm spot in the city, already a few degrees higher than ambient, they also found a place which had these air conditioning ducts.
I'll tell you what, it's getting a bit chilly out here. If I could find a nice bush with a few air conditioning ducts, I might go there myself.
Do you know what? I was hoping for something just a little bit more comfortable to spend my night tonight. Maybe the security and warmth of my own bed. Biggest ever pied wagtail roost, 5,000 birds, and it lasted for 30 years. What about that, Martin? 5,000 pied wagtails, quite a sight.
Fantastic sight, Chris. I've got almost that many swans behind me, I think. If I get attacked, don't worry, I shall just struggle on manfully. Of course, we've been following the arrival of the Buick swans here. Not these are the mute swans. The Buick swans are the ones that fly in from Arctic Russia. And the numbers have built up quite nicely for us. In the first week we were here, we had 3. Last week there were 25. And on Sunday, there's what they call a swanfall. What a lovely term. Not a snowfall, a swanfall. 118 swans arrived, Buick swans. Some of them have moved on, but there are still around 80 here. Let us meet some of the new arrivals. let's introduce you to some of the families arriving at Slimbridge for the winter season. Introducing the Everton Mintons with their 2 lovely cygnets. These first-time parents have been a couple since 2003 and they arrived at Slimbridge on the 13th of November. And the Kolgoyev-Kondrov family, with an 8-year age gap. These parents got together in 2008 and these 3 are their first cygnets together. And finally, the Bybrook-Canel family. After pairing off last year, this new couple have also arrived with their first cygnets. And this family of 6 is bound to dominate other swans, so perhaps keep an eye out for them. Now, in Arctic Russia, there's space for everyone. But when the Buicks arrive here, they're kind of squeezed together a bit, and things can get a bit tense. There are 9 different degrees recognised of aggression, increasing aggression in Buick swans, and we've seen nearly all of them. Have a look at this. First of all, there's a bit of honking, neck stretching, and they call that neck pumping, and now they start to use their wings. Quite aggressive these get, and you get husband and wife teams, male and female, can join together in trying to display to dominate other ones. And finally, when you get up to 9, you can see what goes on. Full-on battles. That really does look quite aggressive. Generally, the solo ones, the ones that arrive here on their own, will get dominated by the groups, the mums, the dads, and the youngsters together. But it can get a little bit rough in the Buick's world. Now, something else has happened. Generally, when they arrive here, they'll come as a family group, if it is a family, that mum, dad, and all the youngsters. And of course, that's very important because the parents show the young cygnets the way to go, the way to come all the way to find their way to Slimbridge. But in one case, that hasn't happened. Look at this. We have a little cygnet here, no mum and dad. Don't know what happened. It could have been that bad weather got him separated from his parents. It could have been they got frightened. And we think that Julian Newth, the expert here, thinks that he's made it here. He may have followed another group of adults, but now that he's here, he will be safe. He'll get fed and there's no predators around, so hopefully he'll be all right. And we need to keep a careful eye on him. And you can keep a careful eye on him too, because, roll of drums, we've got webcams up now, live webcams. They came on at 2 o'clock today, and you can, hello Chris, and you can watch them. We've got 4 cameras, and they'll be on from 10 o'clock in the morning to 4:30 in the evening, every single day, up to the 29th of November.
You have to tune in for that, I think.
You have to tune in for that.
We haven't only got cameras here, though, out on the lagoons around Slimbridge. We've got one out on the marsh, and this is a camera with a very powerful telephoto lens which can zoom in and out. So we're hoping to see lots of wading birds, maybe even a peregrine falcon, something like that. And another treat we've got coming up tonight at 10 o'clock. If you've got a red button, you can press it, or you can go onto our website and there'll be a live chat. Chris Spearing, is a great naturalist, will be interviewing Julia Newth, who's the swan expert here.
She's brilliant.
So if there's anything you want to learn about these swans, listen to Chris and Julia at 10 o'clock tonight.
Fantastic. Now, the swans have migrated in. There's another bird that we've been following that executes a magnificent migration, our ospreys, of course. And the ospreys, we follow them all the way from that nest in Springwatch in Wales right down to Africa. They're at Journey's End, and last week Roy Dennis was actually there in Africa. Could he catch up with our own Springwatch ospreys?
I've come to West Africa to find out how our ospreys are getting on in their new winter home. From the GPS data we have for the birds, we think that sadly Larry, the only female, died soon after she arrived. But the good news is that Aignan and Dillis are both still alive and currently stocked in different parts of Senegal. Dillis is out of our reach for this trip, but I'm crossing the Gambia River and heading up the Senegalese coast to see if I can find Aignan. Before I do that, I want to see why the ospreys make such a huge effort, flying well over 3,000 miles to come here. So I'm stopping at one of the most famous osprey wintering areas in West Africa, the Sin Saloum Delta in Senegal. In autumn, the ospreys from all over Northern Europe come down here to spend their winters. And I can see why, because there's signs of fish everywhere. There's just so much food for ospreys here in these warm, productive delta waters. And the fish are easy to catch because the water is very shallow. These birds are fishing very differently to home. As soon as they spot a fish, they dive at it at a 45-degree angle rather than vertically downwards, and they're just snatching the fish from the surface of the water. They just stretch their really long legs and just click the yellow-tailed mullet from the surface of the water and fly on. It's much easier for them than it would be at home, where food can be hard to come by in our cold British winters. Once the ospreys have got their breakfast, most of them are heading over to one particular island, Ile des Oiseaux, Island of the Birds. My guide, local birder Solomon Jallow, thinks he can get us closer to the ospreys on the beach there.
Now they will sit down and relax, digest their food before coming out for their dinner.
This beautiful island is very carefully protected for conservation, and today Solomon has secured special permission for us to land.
In fact, that's one in the tree.
Yeah. There are so many ospreys here, but I really want to get a closer look at the ones eating their fish on the beach. That's a brilliant view of this osprey. It's a female, really broadly striped at the front, brilliant yellow eye. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4 turnstones. And they're all running in and snatching little bits. But all the time they're within a metre of her and she's just not bothering. What is really interesting is that there's a slender-billed gull. And they're going close to the osprey, and the osprey is allowing the gull to take some of the fish from its bill without attacking it. It's incredible behaviour. I just have not read about that. I didn't know it occurred. I've never seen it myself. And it's because the gull is adopting a submissive posture and running towards the osprey very gently and sort of begging, nearly begging like the young ospreys beg to the adult to get fed. And I suppose really here the osprey doesn't mind at all because catching fish is so easy, and that is a really good fish. That is such a brilliant view. I never thought we'd get so close. I never thought we'd see such fantastically interesting behaviour. And all in front of us, everything happening. Solomon and I must have seen 30 ospreys or more on this island today. It's such an easy life for them here on this part of the West African coast. It's been a fantastic start to my trip, but now it's time to get on our way and see if we can find Enion. I really hope he's found somewhere as good as this for his first winter in West Africa.
The ospreys were great, but that behaviour was amazing.
That's very curious. Have you ever seen anything like that,
I've not
Chris?
seen it in real life. I've seen film of it where species to species, you know, one has been taking food from the other, always in the same way, where the one that's receiving the food is sort of a supplicatory animal. It's almost as if it's begging, as if it's a youngster, and the instinct within the other bird is to therefore pass it food, which is fantastic. Now, Roy is going to be joining us live this evening, so if you've got any questions for him, get onto the message board now, tweet them to us, Facebook them to us, any form of social messaging that you've possibly got at your fingertips, you can try it, and we'll put them to Roy in a few minutes.
Brilliant. Now, the osprey migration is basically instinctive. They just set off, but as is the migration of another of our most loved birds, the cuckoo. Now, we all know the cuckoo's song, but much of its life is a complete mystery until now. Have a look at this.
The cuckoo,
one of our most iconic birds is in trouble. Their numbers have declined by over 50% in the past 25 years, but nobody really knows why. We can study them here in the UK during the breeding season, but almost nothing is known about their migration or where they spend the winter in Africa. Back in Springwatch, we reported that the British Trust for Ornithology had managed to put small radio tags onto 5 male cuckoos for the first time. Discovering where cuckoos spend most of the year and the problems they might face is vital if we're to have any chance of reversing their decline.
Amazing little gadgets going on male cuckoos because they're the bigger of the two sexes. But the most important thing is this, really, because this is where they've gone, Martin.
Look at that.
I know, look, they've split into two, which is fascinating. We always thought they went down through Italy and then jumped across the Mediterranean and then made this extraordinary leap over the Sahara. But we only ever had one ringing recovery, therefore a ring that was put on a cuckoo in the UK, and it was found in Cameroon. There was another one that we controlled a bird, came from the continent, caught it here, went to Togo, but only 2 were known.
I'd just like to add to that, Chris, if I may. We started ringing birds in 1909, 102 years ago, and that tag was found on the 30th of January 1930 in Cameroon. Just to add a little extra bit, mate.
Mate, that was beautiful.
That was science, mate.
Mate, that was beautiful information. I'm in awe. Seriously, no, I love that sort of beautiful information. Getting back to the map,
Sorry.
The other cuckoos, which followed a route which we didn't predict, was that they went down through France and then crossed over, rather like the ospreys in the Gibraltar area, and went down the western coast of Africa and then cut all the way across here to, well, basically most of them were in Congo, which is an extraordinary thing when you think the habitat there is very, very different than the habitat in the UK. I mean, basically, it's tropical rainforest, home of gorillas, forest elephants, these sorts of things.
If we could see what the cuckoos see, Chris, on their travels, it's amazing. They're basically an African bird.
They are. For half the year, they're an African bird. But what gets me is they've completely changed their niche. When they're down here, what are they feeding on? They must be feeding in a place on completely different species. So what an extraordinary thing. And it's certainly the case if we want to concern them, and we are very concerned about their demise, 50% decline in the last 25 years, we really need to know about both sides of their life, and we're going to learn so much more. Those little transmitters could last for another 2 years, so we should be able to follow them all the way back, and then maybe even back again a further time.
So, Chris, we have learnt more in 1 year, practically, than we've learnt in the entire 100 years of ringing before that.
Amazing.
3 cheers, BTO, thank you.
BTO,
Good work.
fantastic, fantastic work. Now, it's always a pleasure to get out and to meet a really progressive conservationist and a great ecologist, and I had that pleasure this week in Sheffield when I took a very interesting walk down a river with someone. I'm going for a walk along the River Don with urban ecologist Ian Rotherham, who's seen the river change dramatically in his lifetime. Ian, you described Sheffield as having its ecological soul gutted and the city having, well, the core of it was biologically dead.
Yeah,
Clearly,
I mean,
it's not any longer then.
Yeah, the river was absolutely killed by the 1970s. The river was actually closed off for centuries. Up to the 1970s, you couldn't get to stand where we are today. You know, the factories were right up to the riverbanks. Raw sewage, detergent, and a very high temperature. Nothing living in it, apart from a few mutant sticklebacks.
Mutant sticklebacks, I like that. But now it's a very different story. Sheffield's rivers are clean and full of life. Both native and foreign species have made their way back. The thing is, though, Ian, that it's a real mishmash of species here with lots of non-natives. And you like that, I like that, but a lot of people don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very peculiar system. The pollution levels have dropped and species are recolonised, and those include non-native species. So the Japanese knotweed, the Himalayan balsam, the Mediterranean figs are all part of this recombinant ecology system.
If you pulled out all of these non-natives now, you'd be stripping this ecosystem of lots of its niches. It may not be functional, so in a way they're playing a really important role. You don't want to get rid of them, do you?
I think A, you don't want to get rid of them, and B, it would actually be impossible. To some extent with this sort of community, you can't pick and choose. You have to manage it to maybe favour things that you want. And we've got mink here. Mink are really bad news for the water voles, but you're not going to get rid of them. You're not going to eradicate them. You have to maybe manage them. And you have to accept that you've got this new dynamic community which is reflecting urbanisation, which is a global process. It's reflecting climate change, which is a global process. We have to learn to live with that.
The purists will be happy though, because kingfishers are back, herons are back.
Absolutely. You can come down here and you can see kingfishers, herons, goosanders, cormorants, otters even, all interacting, all functioning. The great thing is as well that this new ecology in the centre of the city is of value to people. People are coming here, recreating here, fishing here, walking, cycling, living around the river again. It's a new pulsating, vibrant, green artery for people and wildlife.
Ian Rotherham, he really was a very interesting guy, and if you're interested in what he's got to say, then he's written a blog for us that you can check out on the website bbc.co.uk/Autumnwatch.
That was a fascinating film, Michaela. What was the expression? Recombinant ecology.
Yeah.
So the idea is that the new species mix in with the incoming species, the alien species, and then you have to manage that rather than trying to eradicate one, because let's face it, things like Indian balsam, we're never going to eradicate it. So he's working out a strategy to try to deal with the old and the new and manage them together. I think that's the way forward in many areas.
Well, recombinant means recombining the old and the new, and I think it is. You know, with climate change, you can't keep spending so much money trying to eradicate something when you're just not succeeding. So, as he said, let's try and manage it now.
Oh, it's absolutely fascinating. What are we going to do next?
Well, shall I tell you about somewhere interesting that we went to?
Oh, yes,
because
please.
obviously we went down the river, but one of the places that I loved in Sheffield, apart obviously from the pied wagtails, was the cemetery. It's the General Cemetery, and look at it, it's absolutely amazing.
Oh,
it's really old and it's overgrown, it's got loads of old graves in it. Yeah, and look, in the daytime you can see all sorts of wildlife, loads of great birds that you can spot. People walk through quite a lot, so they're quite used to people.
Long-tailed tit, that's beautiful.
Tit,
so they're not shy. You've got a very good chance.
Look, look. I thought you'd like this one.
Bullfinch!
Yeah.
How can people say British birds are dull? Look at that!
Well, a nice bum there. But look, he turns around, gives us a little look. But it was a great place to go, Martin, because I love graveyards. So it's very atmospheric. But it's all very well seeing it in the daytime, but we went back at night with our cameraman, Mark Yates, and take a look at what we saw. Looks stunning.
That's a very handsome owl, I have to say. Look at that.
Looking straight at us, look at that.
You can see the pupils are wide open to let as much light in as possible. That's what that reflected disc is, the tapetum. It's a reflective layer at the back of the eye.
Oh, looks like it's going to go.
It's going to go,
Oh, look at that. Just amazing. I mean, you really cannot hear it when it flies.
I tell you what though, look, the light of the city is lighting the sky here.
Yeah.
And this means that it's easy to see the birds flying around. If we were in the countryside, that would be pitch black and they'd be really difficult for us to spot. Wherever there are predators, like owls, there has to be prey. There it is. I know.
Sweet.
Well, it would be very sweet if you were the owl.
Yes, I know. Shame, eh?
It's not an adult, though. That's a young wood mouse. So what I like here is fodder. Look, the mouse is eating the bramble.
Yeah.
The owl, which is calling down there at the moment, could come up and eat the mouse. And what we've got is a functional ecosystem in a cemetery.